I'll talk to you a bit about what we do with blockchain and how it helps us in our current environment. It's a little bit like teenage sex. It's a quote from our CEO who spoke on blockchain in a banking community about a year ago. And obviously, it refers to the fact that everybody talks about it, but nobody actually does it.
I'll use that.
Yeah.
Can I just repeat what the chairman has just said?
Yeah.
Really, I haven't got a clue what blockchain is. I can't actually visualise it, see it, or anything. Despite the fact we had to talk about it yesterday.
Yeah.
Which I thought was more further explaining what it could do in the future further on. What does it look like?
What does it look like? You know. All right. So I actually don't. I'm not going to show you what it actually looks like. Because it's very technical and it's very much bits and bytes in that sense. So I had a presentation last Friday at Rabobank in Utrecht, and there I did have a presentation with 100 techies and actual kind of programmers. So that was a bit more technical in that sense. So, but at these type of conferences, I try to kind of more explain it in a business type of sense and not necessarily in a very technical sense. So what I'll do is I'll give you a short introduction about kind of Port of Rotterdam, myself, Port of Rotterdam. How do we get projects from ideas up to like kind of a full-scale solution or a full-scale product? Why did we choose blockchain as one of the innovations or one of the technologies that we want to focus on? And a little bit about our blockchain field lab that we have established in this last year. And last but not least, so when you do get from an idea to a product or a service, what do you actually encounter and how can you go about this and what are our learnings on this process? A little bit about the port and industrial area of Rotterdam. Port of Rotterdam is responsible as an authority to managing the port area, but also managing the nautical safety in the port area. It's approximately 25 miles wide. And it takes me as long to get to the end of the port area from my office as it does to get to London. So this to give you an indication of how long it takes to get from A to B. Actually, I don't think that this thing has a pointer, but our office is, if you see on the right-hand side, you see that yellow box. And under the yellow box, there's a little building that is presented over there, and that's where our office is. So obviously, going to the end of the port area takes quite a while. And what's also good to mention is that there's a differentiated portfolio of companies in our area as well. Just some pictures of what the port areas look like. It's a very big area, 12,500 hectares. So it's obviously everything looks different in that sense, and every part of the port area houses different types of companies. And the Master 2 area, the bottom right, is the newest addition. We reclaimed approximately 2,000 hectares of land between 2010 and 2014, and we have just the terminals that are operating in this area have started operations quite recently and are ramping up to full potential. A little bit about the figures. As I said, about 12,500 hectares in the port area, 12,500 soccer fields of land with companies. About 90% of this is actually leased out. So we are almost full. And so almost room for a Maas Vlakte 3, although I don't think that's ecologically possible. We employ, well actually the port area employs approximately 175,000 people. We as a company only employ 1,200, but these are all the companies in our area that obviously do business. Roughly 21 billion added value in the area, which equates to approximately 3% of GDP. So quite a lot of added value created in the Rotterdam area. Another fun fact is that we also emit 20% of all the CO2 in the Netherlands, which obviously is a little bit out of balance if you look at the 3%. What I mentioned earlier, I showed you the picture of all the different companies that we have in the area. But if you kind of break it down to the different cargo flows that we have through the Port of Rotterdam, it comes down to four major components: liquid bulk, dry bulk, containers, and break bulk. And as you can see, we're very much dominated by fossil fuels and logistics, which on the one hand is a good thing, but on the other hand, as I'll show later, is a bit of a challenge. Port of Rotterdam is still in the top 20 of largest ports in the world, although we have gone down to number 9. But still, we're actually we're the only European port in the list, and the single non-Asian, non-Eurasian port in the list. If you take a look at the size that we have as opposed to the other European ports, you can see that approximately we have the same size as number 2, 3, 4, and 5 combined, which obviously makes us quite an important party within the European area. We also have approximately 40% of all the cargo flows in and out of Europe to other continents flowing through the Port of Rotterdam. A little bit about our mission. This is a mission that we restated approximately 2 to 3 years ago. And what's really important to mention here is that we don't necessarily just look at economic value created, but also at the social aspect. And that's driven by the fact that we have two major shareholders. The Port of Rotterdam is owned by the municipality of Rotterdam for 70%, and 30% is owned by the Dutch state, which was attracted, or which came in as a shareholder in 2008 at the beginning of the reconstruction or the addition of the Maasvlakte 2 area, as fresh capital was needed. So what are our challenges that we face in the Port of Rotterdam, which led up to the fact why we are looking at innovations like blockchain? I'll start on the bottom left and bottom right, and you see energy transition is a major factor in why we are looking at innovations. Paris Accord was signed end of 2015, making a necessity for us to reduce emissions by 95%. As I mentioned, 30 million tons, or 20% of total Dutch emissions are being emitted in Rotterdam, so we need to do something. Because ultimately, our shareholders are public bodies, so ultimately it will be enforced upon us to help these parties reduce these emissions. At the same time, we saw Port of Amsterdam as a good example, telling their clients, well, you know what, at the end of 2030, we have to actually comply with these regulations or comply with these rules. So you can't do your business, your coal business in Port of Amsterdam anymore by 2030. This was not a way for us to do business, since we would like to stay friends with our clients and not push them away. So we said, well, how about we make an arrangement with our clients to help them to stimulate innovation, stimulate growth in a way that they can actually become sustainable and comply with these rules by 2030, 2040, and 50, as to make sure that we keep the economic value in the area. And then there is digitalization. Obviously, everything is becoming digitized, everything is becoming bits and bytes. So also in the port area, and I think that's one of the major influences that we see, for instance, in the logistical sector, where everything is becoming much more about efficiency. Not necessarily just efficiency, but efficiency is a major driver. And the other one obviously being new business models and new forms of value being created in this sector. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Port of Rotterdam is nearly full when it comes to the amount of land being leased out to his clients. So we also need to move away from a system which is much more volume-based and storage-based to a throughput-based system where we can actually focus on maximizing the value for our clients rather than making the most amount of money in the area. So, we used to have a system where you paid per, you still have that for some clients, but where you pay per square meter, so the amount of money or the amount of land needed, for us it was always best to lease out the most amount of lands. Rather, for our clients, it's obviously most beneficial when the land is being used most efficiently, because they can actually do more business on a smaller plot. So what do we see in the market? Which new initiatives do we see? As I mentioned earlier, the digitalization is very, very important. And one of the key elements that we have seen when we talk to clients is that the demurrage costs for the oil industry are roughly 100 billion euros a year globally. Massive amounts of figures. It's a big issue for the companies operating in this business, and they're looking to optimize their operations. If you look at an hour time savings at a terminal in Rotterdam for a VLCC, a very large crude carrier, you talk about 200,000 euros cost savings per hour in the Port of Rotterdam area. So obviously, to remain attractive as a port, you need to either reduce cost, to increase speed, reduce the risk, or increase reliability, or all four. So I think this is one of the main components where we take a look together with our clients what we can do to help them. And making a difference on price per square meter kind of diminishes when you look at these kind of figures. We have 10,000 very large ships coming into the area on an annual basis. If every ship can save 200,000 euros a year, you're talking about probably 40 times our annual revenue what we save these companies. On the other hand, when you look at logistical processes, 8%, roughly 8% of the total logistical process, or the logistical process equates to approximately 8% of total worldwide GDP in terms of cost. Several trillions in terms of this cost that this process costs on an annual basis. And if you take a look at kind of the container process going from China to Germany, it takes roughly 4 weeks. A container to ship 40 days to ship from mid-China to mid-Germany. But out of these 40 days, roughly 16 days, it is sitting idle somewhere in the process, either being in a port, waiting for a train, or waiting at an inland terminal. Somewhere in the process it's sitting idle. So obviously there's still quite a bit of inefficiency in this process which we can optimize further for our clients. So kind of coming to the point, we just saw all these issues that we have as a company or that our supply chain has. We had to come up with a system where we actually try to help them without trying to do everything at once. One thing that we're good at is infrastructure investments. Infrastructure is our thing. The Maastricht 2 area was constructed almost 400 million below cost, within time, almost a year early. That's something that we do really well. But something that we don't do well are digital improvements. Digital services, digital products, that's new to us. It's not something that we do. So we had to come up with a different type of system. So we came up with an ID management system where we phased kind of the process of coming from an idea all the way to an end product. And what you see on the left-hand side is that we split an opportunity phase and a realization phase. So obviously, if you spend a lot of time improving your opportunity and actually structuring what you're trying to create for your client, your realization phase becomes much more easier and much less risky. On the left-hand side, you see this arrow kind of going back and forth. Basically, what we're doing in this process, in this ideation process, what we do is we constantly pivot ourselves and pivot the idea to make sure that what we're doing actually benefits the client, actually benefits one of the 4 components which make up our business model. Either reduces the cost, reduces or increases the speed, or reduces the length of the process, increases the reliability, and or reduces the risk in the process. And on the right-hand side, you see we split up also the process for realization into several different processes. So what we do now is we also categorize projects, products on a value at risk basis, where we say, well, we need to identify management attention on these projects which have the most value impact and or the most uncertainty in realization. So why did we actually go towards blockchain? What was the reason for us to start looking at this? When you look at a port, we are very much alike in terms of a bank, of a financial system. And we also depend on security, on trust in our area. I think the logistical sector in Rotterdam is the most closed system in the Netherlands. Everybody knows each other, and they only do business with each other because they trust each other. And we see the evolution of trust. We went from a decentralized system to a centralized system, and now we're slowly moving towards a distributed system. And I think that's one of the key components for us. Just like banks do, we don't want to become obsolete in the new type of era. The four-corner model will end, and trust will have a different meaning in the future. Just like a KYC process as a bank, if you go to bank A and you have an account and you try and open an account at bank B, you have to go through this whole KYC process over again. And we have the same issue. If somebody does business in the port of Singapore, why don't we trust this party in Port of Rotterdam? Why do we have to do our own KYC all over again? And this is one of the main components. This trust component is one of the main issues that we have in the Rotterdam area, where we need to take a look at what we can do to optimize business for our clients. And there's a couple of examples of trust, and I think the most important one being money. Money is also a form of trust. And the economist called Bitcoin or blockchain the trust machine, because it is a way actually to revolutionize how we trust each other. I think that's the best way to explain what blockchain is. It creates an open system. It creates transparency in a system where you share information between parties without actually having to see the individual transaction or the individual data point to allow for a transaction to take place. And a transaction can be either a financial transaction, a social transaction, a logistical transaction, anything where value is moved from A to B. So why did we pick blockchain? And I think it is a little bit small in terms of the font, but there's basically two components why we chose blockchain as a technology to look at, and it comes down to either creating efficiencies in your supply chain or being able to create new business models for yourself or for your clients. There's different ways to look at it. This is an example from a banking perspective, but you could probably copy almost every sector into this overview and have a similar picture. So what we did.
And what was LSP on the second column?
Logistical service provider.
Thank you.
So basically what we did is that we thought to ourselves, so how are we going to have our companies in the area embrace this technology? How are we going to help them actually share this information amongst each other so that they optimize the system between each other? And we had an issue where we have created, a good example is that we have created competition within the port area by establishing allowing 5 different container terminals to create competition on pricing for containers coming into Rotterdam. What we didn't think about the fact was that they would all send their containers one by one on trains to the hinterland to Germany, thus fragmenting the market, going back to Germany with their containers, and everybody sending half-full trains to Germany, thus making a loss on these train services. So we actually need to have parties working together to further improve their supply chain, further reduce costs, and actually optimize the system for the greater good. We spent a good week in Dubai earlier this year with a party from India who sent their oranges from India to Dubai. They turned them into orange juice and then sent them by plane to Spain. A little bit the other way around in the sense that normally you would see it from Spain going to India, but in this way, what they did is they sent it from India to Spain. But basically, what happened is that this process took 2 weeks in total. But what the people from our department did, or from our company did, was they went with these guys with this process, and they timed how long every step took. So out of this 14 days, this actual transaction or this actual process only took place for 4 days. So there's 10 days of waste in this particular process. And it shows you that companies individually optimize processes, but they don't look at it from a holistic point of view, that they can actually reduce the cost of the system dramatically. So that was one of the reasons why we started generating or trying putting together a type of system where parties could work together, and we created the Block Lab as an institution. And so basically, what it does, it wants to bring parties together, create consortia to tackle these types of larger problems, and in the end, create a smarter and cheaper system. As you can see, we've just started working together with 3 types of blockchain technology: IOTA, Hyperledger, and Ethereum. Does anybody know how many types of blockchain technologies are in the market right now? 968. That does not include all the cryptocurrencies that are around. These are just the technologies to actually generate blockchain.
Suppliers of or enablers or
No, it's only the technologies. So it's
More than one type of blockchain. Blockchain
Yes.
is like a generic term.
a generic
There are
term.
different set
Yes.
of algorithms within it.
Bitcoin is a type of blockchain. Ethereum is a type of blockchain. IOTA is one. Hyperledger is one. So there's different types of blockchains. And then you have, besides that, you have the cryptocurrencies. And then you have alternative currencies. Cryptocurrencies are forms of payment. Alternative currencies, altcoins, will give you part of a product at a later stage. So there's different ways to look at this. But blockchain is the underlying technology to exchange information and to further optimize the system by means of smart contracting. So what we brought together knowledge institutions, government, companies, but also public bodies together to actually work together to solve these issues. Because obviously, once you start looking at, for instance, a custom system, you can't do this just from a corporate perspective, because you also need government intervention, and you need different legislation, and so you need a lot of different parties at the table to make this happen. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go through a couple of the proof of concepts that we've run through. One is Deliver, which is a trade finance type of a proof of concept. So what we've done, this is the example of how the process looks like. So what we found is that 1 meter of roses in this transaction equates to 1 meter of paperwork. So what we said is, well, how can we optimize this process? So we digitized the whole process. We digitized the bill of lading with a smart contract, so that if certain data points were triggered, the actual transaction would take place, so that a carrier or a producer can invoice at the point in time where it leaves the facility, not when it gets to the customer. Because you know along the way where the goods are at all points in time, and it's transparent for the whole supply chain. For the producer, for the customer, for the supplier, sorry, for the customer, for the bank, for the insurance company, everybody knows where what is at what point in time. Another one is a smart container, a virtual container, which uses all the data points around to book itself. It has a sensor within the container to be able to actually book itself around the globe, so there's no more personal or manual intervention. And this is one where we're still at the early stages of the project, but this is one of the most revolutionizing ones, because obviously, given the fact that 8% of the total GDP is logistical cost, we can revolutionize the total system in that sense. I was just told I only have 5 more minutes, so I'll quickly go through a couple energy proof of concepts that we've done, and I think the one that we have over here, Eneco and CGI are creating a system where we're creating a new market model for a heat network, where we're able to price based upon the temperature of the heat. So, and by means of the blockchain system, we're able to exchange the information real time, so we're actually able to not only price but also transact this heat in a almost real time system, and we create a transaction between a producer and the end customer. So there's no more system in the sense that the distributor has to buy the energy from the producer and then sell it. There's always an interaction between the producer and the consumer. and the blockchain is able to verify the legitimacy of each transaction, if it's, for instance, if it's green or not. So in that way, we can further optimize the system. So what are our practical learnings and what are the challenges that we've faced over the years? Basically, that trust is not necessary to start this process. A lot of the times, people say, "Well, hey, I don't want to go through this process with you because I don't trust that we are aligned in what we want to achieve." And what we have seen is that trust is something that you build along the way. Once you start kind of sharing information, sharing knowledge, then you build trust to work with each other. Another one which is really important is that you just have to start. There's no right or wrong moment to start. It's just like trading in that sense. There's always going to be ups and downs in the process. You just have to start, you just have to do it. And maybe the other one that's really important is that you have to choose your partners real wisely up front, so you don't end up with a large consortium of 20, 30 parties doing this proof of concept with you. Because otherwise, if there's 20 parties in the process, you won't get anywhere. So you have to limit it to maybe 3, 4 parties to really get to the bottom of what you're trying to achieve. Any questions?
You said there are
Okay, ahead, sorry.
900 something blockchain solutions or providers or whatever. How did you choose the 3 partners you have today?
So these three that we have started with are the ones that we already had pilots running in our own business. So we had already had pilots running in the port of Rotterdam before starting the blockchain lab. So we already had partners in that sense that we already had. And these 3 are also the largest ones that are out there right now. So we also chose them in terms of size and usage, so we are able to actually provide this information and this technology to the largest group of partners in our area. Oh.
Yeah, 2 questions. One is related to this. So are these 900 plus companies offering the same technology? Is the technology standard?
No.
It is not.
It's basically, it's kind of like looking at back in the day when you had a Linux computer, a Microsoft computer, and an Apple computer. Everybody has similar functionalities, but the technology behind is different. And one of the main challenges that we face is that make sure that all of these technologies become interoperable so they work with each other. So it doesn't matter if a client has an Ethereum system or a Hyperledger system, but they start interacting between each other.
Also, the second question real quick, because there was another discussion yesterday about this very topic, and the way I understood was it's a new technology, but as I hear you, it's not actually just new technology, it's just optimizing and approaching in a smart way. I mean, it's not a technology that didn't exist perhaps before, and all of a sudden.
Well, the difference is that the technology itself or the idea itself is that you can also look at it from a relational database point of view, which we had in the 80s, or an SQL database, which we had already in the 80s. And that's not where the difference is. The difference is the fact that it's a distributed technology, just like the internet. So everybody in the network that connects to this particular blockchain has a copy of the database.
You just agree to.
And you agree to exchange, and that's
2 companies doing this.
sorry.
It could be just 2 companies.
That depends on what the agreement is that you have made on the blockchain. And so, for instance, the Bitcoin, everybody on the Bitcoin network has to agree when a transaction is added to the system, and that's why when you do a Bitcoin transaction, it takes about 2 days for it to be added to the system, because everybody has to agree that this transaction has taken place, and they verify that this transaction has taken place. Whereas there's other forms where, because this is a public blockchain, whereas obviously in a logistical network where there is thousands of parties, and where you don't have 2 days to verify a transaction, you have to find a different mechanism to come to a conclusion to actually get something on the blockchain and to exchange the information. So that's one of the main components, which still has to be tested and verified in the next couple of months, years. How can we create a system which is scalable, but at the same time secure?
Is the current technology not scalable then? Because everyone's talking about blockchain changing the world and reducing staff and being totally incorruptible database, so trust is now guaranteed. So actually it doesn't matter who the counterparty is because it's incorruptible, but you've just said that it isn't quite scalable.
The scalability is mostly on the energy consumption side.
Yes, it uses a lot of electricity, doesn't it?
Yes. So if you take a look, all the transactions that took place on the Bitcoin network in 2017 use up as much energy as the whole country of Ireland. Just to give you an example. And so obviously, if that scales up even further, it's incomprehensible how much energy this will take. So this is one of the main components why the Bitcoin network is not scalable to an extent that it would actually work.
Considering how much immersed you are in blockchain, are you accepting making payments in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies within your network or
No.
suppliers? Why not?
Because I differentiate between cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Blockchain is a technology to exchange the information. Cryptocurrencies is creating a community of parties that are willing to exchange a transaction or willing to exchange a value on a different method than a hard currency.
Sure, but when I say immersed, you really are comfortable, so to speak, with blockchain. So have you looked at Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, for sure.
No?
No, we've looked at other currencies, and we've even looked at maybe introducing a port coin, or we've looked at that as well. But the question, of course, is that for us to introduce something like a Bitcoin or accepting Bitcoins, it really depends on if our community embraces this as well. And we can actually allow for these payments to happen, but if the community doesn't embrace it, then actually it might end up hurting us more than helping us.
Well, that's why I'm asking you the question.
I'm afraid I do have this. We could talk about this all afternoon, I think, but I do have to stop it there. Unfortunately, I've got my marching orders. Tim, fantastic. Thanks very much indeed. I appreciate it.
Great.